Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and for attending our TIC University, the first of 2016. As you saw on the email, we're going to be talking about our new compensation module, and we wanted to share not only with you how the system looks, but also we wanted to share best practices regarding compensation. So we have here today Barbara McIntosh, our Executive Director of Learning and Development Solutions, and she's also an expert in compensation. And our Client Relationship Manager, Laura Fritchie, and she's an expert in the system. So both of them are really going to give you a lot of information that hopefully you find beneficial. So here they are, and I hope you enjoy. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We have everybody muted, but probably your, the screen that you're looking at on the right-hand side, you have a menu with a chat box. So if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them there. We'll see them, and at the end of the presentation, we'll answer them. If we don't have enough time, we'll make sure that we email them to you and contact you. Again, if you have any questions, we'll definitely answer them. And we will also be emailing you this presentation. So with that said, here it is.
Hello, everyone. This is Barbara McIntosh. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And thank you, Hema. As she mentioned, we wanted to take some time to go over a few things with everyone that's joining us today. Spend a little bit of time just talking about compensation administration, what that is, what are some best practices and trends that we're seeing in compensation administration and base salary administration. Then developing a salary structure. So we know that some organizations have structures and some don't. The Talent Quest system can accommodate salary administration in either of those scenarios, but we did want to talk about just what are some different types of structures and options and pros and cons of those different types of structures. Then moving on to pay differentiation, pay for performance, and what we're seeing with trends in terms of salary and structure increases. And once we've kind of move past the trends and best practices, I'm going to turn it over to Laura, and she's going to walk us through the compensation module so that you'll have an opportunity to see how the module supports these best practices and really helps to make compensation administration both efficient as well as really aligned with organizational goals. There are a number of different types of compensation. So when we say compensation, the one that we're really going to focus on today, or the component I should say we're going to focus on today, is base salary and base pay administration. Short-term incentives, long-term incentives, variable pay, overtime pay, equity compensation, all of those types of things can be incorporated in the module as well. However, for today's class in TQ University, we really wanted to focus on what most people could see as kind of the main component of compensation, and that's base salary. And specifically wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about salary structures. So there are a number of different types of structures. As you can see here, a traditional salary structure typically has a range spread, and a range spread is the distance from the minimum to the maximum of the range of 20% to 40%, with midpoint progressions from 5% to 10%. So when we say midpoint progressions, we're talking about the jumps, if you will, from the midpoint or the middle of one grade to the next grade. Market-based structures are going to have range spreads that are going to be a little bit wider, 30% to 80%, and then there's going to be a little bit more room because we've got wider ranges between those grades in terms of jumps between those midpoints. Broadbands, these are going to be structures with very, very large ranges, 80% to 200%, with no defined midpoints. So there's a lot of latitude for differentiating pay within different types of positions based on performance, based on a number of different variables. And then step structures are going to be very, very narrow range spreads. So they might be, 20, 10%, and the midpoint progressions, again, 5 to 10% with defined points. So what's going to take you from one step to the next step. So that's just an overview of some of the different types of structures. And usually what's going to drive what type of structure an organization wants to have. It's going to be a combination of the philosophy, the pay philosophy, how much how much HR, how much the organization or the compensation department or executives want to really control what the latitude that managers have for making pay decisions based on an individual's role, where they are within a range in their performance, versus how much they maybe want to give them a lot of latitude versus not a lot of latitude. This is just an example of a salary structure, and you can see there's really 3 different options, and that's just based on how the pay is distributed for employees that are falling into those grades. But with this structure, and in this example, we've got 12 salary grades, and what would constitute a position being in a particular grade is typically going to be those positions that are seen to be similar both in terms of internal equity, so internal equity being representative of what the position scope, responsibility, the value of the position, if you will, as it relates to other positions within the organization, as well as the external market, so external competitiveness. So the combination of those, when you find that positions sort of hang together, if you will, that's usually what's going to determine whether they're going to be in the same grade or whether they're going to be in different grades. So going back to the types of structures, we are seeing a trend to more market-based structures. So if traditional structures may have had less emphasis on market data and more emphasis on internal value, we are seeing a trend of organizations putting more emphasis on incorporating market data into their structures. And that could be either individual market data points for each position, which can be a little difficult to administer, or just ensuring that the salary range is indicative of the market for the positions that are included in that range. So steps to determine or to develop a salary structure. Typically you're going to have a number of steps, and the first is going to be determine the market position philosophy. So where you want to pay within the market is going to be a critical component of deciding what the values are going to be associated with those ranges. Some individuals or some organizations will choose to take a position within the market, for instance, the median of the market or 50th percentile of the market, which is the most common, and then defining that market by things such as industry, organization size, revenue or employees, assets if it's financial institutions. For some positions, you might have a different market philosophy than for other positions. So if you've got critical positions to your organization, hot jobs, you might decide to pay them a little bit higher in terms of positioning within the market than other positions. You may also choose to target different markets for different levels. So at lower levels in your organization, you might decide that you are not specific to the industry because that's not necessarily driving the talent that you want to attract, but you are more focused on the geographic labor market. Once you've got your philosophy, then you want to make sure you have a good understanding of the internal value of jobs. And this can be done a number of different ways, as formally as having a point system that's associated with evaluating positions, or as informally as just having a good understanding of how those positions are as seen and in kind of the pecking order, both within a particular department as well as across departments. Once you've got a good handle on your internal job evaluation, then you can go to market. And this is when you can employ published salary surveys. Talent Quest has the ability to provide this type of market intelligence and market information. Just ensuring that we're taking into consideration your philosophy and your desired scope and market position. And then from there, you can overlay the market analysis with the internal job evaluation, and that's ultimately what's going to determine your structure. So what's the advantage of having a formal structure? Well, one is it's easy to administer. Than to have individual market ranges with each particular position. As you can imagine, that could fluctuate quite a bit over a year. So it could be better to just have a range that's associated with a group of positions as opposed to just one. It also allows for decisions about internal alignment, so it ensures that you are not only that you're paying positions appropriately based on where they are seen within the market, the internal value of positions, as well as the performance. So it can help to identify and or correct for any internal inequities that it may occur with pay. So if we have individuals, for instance, who have been with us for a long time and they've moved throughout, they've moved with salary through over the years, but we've had to bring in people at a higher rate externally at that same position or for that same position because of market pressures, having a structure will really highlight where those inequities occur and where we might want to adjust for that to ensure that we're paying people aligned with our philosophy. In addition, there are going to be times when there are positions that don't have a really direct market benchmark match. So there might be a position that wears a couple of different hats, or it's sort of a blended position between different functions, and the market data just doesn't exist because it's so unique. And in those cases, the structure and taking into consideration the value of that position and aligning it with other positions within the organization with a similar value can help to provide guidance around what the appropriate compensation for that position might be. Okay, so I mentioned competitive positioning and strategy. This is just some data that you've seen from World at Work and Deloitte, and clearly the median, the 50th percentile, is the most prevalent, the most common market philosophy for organizations. So that's going to be where 50% of the market pays above and 50% pay below. And this is really looking at base salary. So when we start talking about and thinking about variable compensation, organizations might use the variable compensation to say, you know, our base philosophy is median of the market. However, you have the ability to reach the 75th percentile of the market in terms of total cash compensation, which is base plus variable pay, if certain objectives are met. But again, for base pay, we are still seeing that the median is the most common positioning. And we're also seeing that while I mentioned there are in salary structures, there are times where you might have a different philosophy or competitive strategy for different types of positions or work segments. We still see that the competitive strategy or policy is typically expressed in terms of the percentile levels of the market. So consistently midpoints are tied to a single competitive position as opposed to it varying based on geography. Now, that being said, you might take into consideration geographic differentials, but it's still based on that same market philosophy in terms of, you know, whatever the scope is, industry size. And frequency, because we get asked this a good bit, you know, how often should we adjust our ranges? Well, annually is the most typical time or frequency for adjusting salary ranges, and this may be based on just an overall salary structure increase percentage. That is a statistic that a number of sources publish, and you can find that for different industries. You can find it for different sized organizations. Or it might be looking at structures from a benchmark perspective, so taking a look at the market for a couple of jobs within each range, as opposed to actually doing a full analysis on the structure. But we are seeing some sort of adjusting happening annually, most typically, and then least frequently for it to happen more than that. And then some organizations do choose to wait a couple of years to do that. We tell clients typically that you don't want to go more than 2 years without taking a look at your ranges and adjusting your structure, or you're going to run into a situation where you're probably going to have a lot of positions that are bumping up against the top end of the range. Salary budget increase data is data that can be used to help to inform the decisions that you make around both what increases or typical increases in salary are, as well as what those increases are related to performance, what the structure increases are. This is some data from Towers and their general industry salary budget survey. World at Work also publishes this annually and is another great resource for this information. As you can see, what we're seeing in 2005 actual and 2016 projected is that organizations are still lingering around that 3% mark in terms of increases in base salary. So again, this is base salary. One thing to point out is that you'll see in the header that the statistics for total salary increases, it includes those granting no increase. A couple of years ago, after the recession, or really in the heart of the recession, 2009, 2010, 2011, there was a drastic difference in the data depending on whether or not it was analyzed with the organizations that reported no increase versus organizations that did report an increase. So in other words, there were so many organizations at that time that were freezing salaries, so their response to this would be zero, that it was really pulling down those averages. So the difference between, you might have organizations that were giving increases to be 3%, if you only looked at the group that said, yes, we are having increases, we are implementing increases, versus when you rolled in those organizations that also said that they were not going to be given increases, which in some years was as high as a third to half of the organizations that were surveyed, it would draw that number down to 1.5. So one kind of positive thing to note will be that when you look at this data for companies that are not granting, it only when you look at it, when you don't include the companies that are granting no increases, it only increases these by a small percentage, which tells us that majority of organizations are giving increases in 2016. Another thing to note is when we talk about distribution of pay and pay for performance, the table below, salary increases related to performance ratings, this shows what they found to be the typical distribution or the average salary increases granted and how that differs from the highest possible rating to a below average rating. So you see below average 0.7%, above average 4 points, or highest possible rating 4.6. So thinking about how is that distributed across different performance categorizations of employees, pivoting around that 3% budget, that's the distribution that that they'd reported. So there is a distribution. Which brings us to the next component, and something that we're going to take a look at in the system and how our system and our module can help to automate this functionality. Organizations that have a salary structure as well as performance ratings have an opportunity to really to differentiate pay and to differentiate recommendations and guidelines around pay decisions based on not only just performance but also position and range, and we call this the merit matrix. So what this can do is, if you have a merit matrix that is designed based on your structure, you'll see here an example. We've got 4 quartiles. So the first quartile is representative of individuals who are falling in the lower end of the range. Ideally, these are going to be folks that have room to grow. Maybe they were newly hired. Maybe they aren't our strongest performers. And then as you move up to the 4th quartile, you should ideally have folks at the top end of the range that are our superstars. So we are encouraged, even though we're managing around the midpoint when we have a salary structure such as this, you do want to have a distribution across the entire range so that we're paying people maybe on average at the midpoint, but we do have folks that we pay above, and we have folks that we might pay below. However, if you've got really outstanding performers that are lower in the range, that would suggest that we could be at risk for losing those from a competitive standpoint. So we might want to allocate more of our budget dollars to their increase in salary as opposed to that same level at a higher level in the range. So this merit matrix provides the opportunity for these guidelines to be set. And so when managers are making their decisions, it is correcting for what we would call inequities. So we're ensuring that we're not only recognizing performance, but we're also correcting for where people might be paid lower to market being representative of where they are in the range for whatever reason. So we'll show how this looks in the system. One thing to mention, we're going to send you this slide deck. We aren't going to go over all of these definitions, but you will have the opportunity for this to have this information and to have those definitions. But I'm going to turn it over now to Laura, who is going to show us the module and talk a little bit about how the functionality can help to support some of these best practices.
All right. Well, thank you, Barbara. It was very informative. I hope everybody on the line feels like they have learned as much as I have. So yes, so as Barbara mentioned, we want to kind of jump over to the system just to show you that we can incorporate many of the items that Barbara was speaking to earlier. So the first is really around that base pay administration. So for those of you on the line that might be familiar with our performance module, you'll see here that the template looks very, very similar. But we have a lot of new and exciting options within the compensation module. So you can see right here at the beginning in our planning and budgeting, we do incorporate many different currencies. We also get into this base salary administration and kind of what your organization has decided to incorporate into your compensation reviews. So we call these components. So what are we going to be talking about? Are we talking about a salary component to the merit? Or are we talking a non-salary component, something like a bonus? Within that, so within each component, we can establish a budget as well as review guidelines. So when the manager or the term that we deem in Talent Quest the allocator, the individual who's giving these salary increases or bonuses, are they going to have a guideline based upon, say, a performance score? So if we open up here this merit matrix, you can see that we can incorporate really anything. This particular matrix is based upon performance and range penetration. It's nicely color-coded so that you can see where the higher dollars are going to be versus where the lower dollars are going to be. It's very easily configured. If you want to bring in other metrics that are programmed within the system, we can do that, and you just easily update by typing in what the ranges are going to be. So the next item is if you don't have a merit matrix, that certainly doesn't prevent you from using the system. The other option we have is to use a range. So for the bonus component, there is a 5% budget, but using a range for each individual allocation is also going to be 5%. But those can vary as well. A nice thing to note about the setup for each component is that you can enable proration or not. That way, if we're doing compensation reviews and somebody just started 6 months ago, they don't have to receive the full percentage increase for the effective date. And we can also base proration on hire date or adjusted hire date or any custom date that you want to configure into the Talent Quest system. I won't bore everybody on the call with walking through each setting of the template. We'd be happy to share more information for those of you who are interested, but I'm going to hit on some of the highlights. The nice thing that we have within the compensation review are something that we call constraints. So if you recall, for each component we established the target budget, the individual guideline, but per role we can say who is going to be allowed to go outside of the budget, who's going to be allowed to go outside of those individual guidelines. And if you do allow them to go outside the guidelines, are you going to require that they leave comments and justification? So if you were to leave everything unchecked, then your allocator in this instance would not be able to make an allocation outside of the guideline. And that's a really good feature for those of you administrators who really kind of want to keep things within a very specific and sometimes tight budget. The worksheet itself that I will show you here in a few minutes is configurable. For those of you that are current clients of ours, you'll know that we recently added an unlimited number of custom fields. So we can pull in the standard fields from their profile as well as any custom fields that you want to send information on, anything that would be useful to an allocator when they're making those salary changes. For the approval step, kind of a highlight here would be that we can stipulate approval based upon a condition. So if you were to allow your allocators to go outside of the guidelines, as an example, you could say that those that go above budget require an approval. Those that are under budget or within budget do not require approval, and they can move forward in the process. Calibration is another nice feature to the compensation review. Here they are given kind of their own constraints, and as well as the ability to, or not, to edit the allocation made by the original manager or the original allocator. So what I'll get in and show you in a few minutes is what the calibrator will see from a task standpoint and the tools that they can use within the system that will help them get a really good picture of how things are looking overall in terms of sticking to budget and staying within those targets.
Yeah, so just to add to that, one of the great features of the system is, whether you're a manager or whether you're really somebody that's in charge or charged with the salary administration process and ensuring that you are adhering to a budget, this gives visibility into those, what the results of the increases that, or the compensation recommendations that are being made by managers are, and how those are going to be impacting that overall budget. So it really allows for that visibility, real-time visibility through a dashboard or reporting features, so you can adjust and address issues where needed.
Yep, absolutely. We also have a communication stage as a part of our process, and another really nice feature is the salary letter. This is something that you can configure specific to your organization, and it's really nice because it can be sent out automatically from the system. You can even upload a template signature so that the letter looks very formal, as if it's from your organization, and just totally simplifies and streamlines that completion process. So let's get into the exciting part, which would be to see what it looks like from a task standpoint. And I apologize, I've lost my login here, so bear with me. Okay. Okay, there we go. So you'll notice here that James has the task to allocate. He can have a really quick view to all of those. In this case, these are his direct reports, and he can see when these allocations are due, as well as any allocations that he's already completed and pushed forward. He can see that 4 are in the approval step, 2 are a pending calibration start, and 1 is already completed. So he clicks in to perform his task, and then we can see the worksheet. When you first click in, it'll be kind of this condensed view. To view its full screen, we click the full screen icon. And this is what we call our worksheet. The really nice thing here is that no matter what stage his direct reports, the those compensation reviews and those merit increases that have already been pushed forward, he still sees them and he can keep an eye on the status. You'll notice here that there are some errors with 2 of his allocations. If he clicks on this error icon, he can see that the reason that this is a problem is that he's gone over the individual guideline for Fabian. And so you can see for this particular compensation review, the allocator is not allowed to go outside that guideline. So if we scroll over, you can see all of the different columns in this worksheet. The things that I'm going to want to focus on are right here in the middle, which would be the performance score, the merit increase guideline, and then ultimately the merit increase itself. So if you'll recall that merit matrix that we saw earlier, if we just click on this information icon, it pulls up that matrix. So Fabian had a score of 3.00, and this is where he falls on the matrix. So it's giving a recommended increase of 2.5 to 3%. James has given initially a 3.5% increase. So it has turned his numbers red because he is over budget. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this down to a 2.8, and you'll see that no matter if we enter the percentage or enter a dollar amount, the information updates automatically. Once he is within the guideline, the numbers are now changed to black, as well as the numbers here have updated. So his target budget, the allocated dollars, as well as unallocated dollars, dynamically update with each change. If you are under budget, you'll notice that everything is green. So it's a very nice, clean view of all the changes that he's making. If we come over here toward the end, you can see our second component of this compensation review. And this goal achievement percentage is another configurable metric that has been included within the system. So for these particular metrics, there is a range incorporated for a recommended bonus. And so again, those update whether you input the dollars, the percentage will update as well. The allocator has the ability to view and leave comments. And so it kind of keeps, it also keeps a bit of a audit log, so you can see that there was a refresh where the salary changed, and it keeps track of any changes made to the worksheet. So it's a nice way to keep an eye on all changes made. So when the allocator is ready to submit, he can simply select an individual and submit them into approval. One other note I wanted to make about the worksheet was that we do have this nice metrics tab with graphs that the allocator can kind of see the performance versus the allocation, the status of the compensation reviews, as well as performance versus average allocation. Okay. So if we go back to the home page, we can, actually I need to come see back to Carmen's homepage. She has the task to approve allocations.
So this would be an example maybe where Carmen is the manager.
Yes, so Carmen could be the second level manager over James. Okay. She could be the comp admin, etc. Got it. So great, thanks. Okay. So the nice thing about the approval is that in the task, the approver gets to see all of the allocators who have submitted reviews for approval and where those total allocations stand. So we can see here that Ellen has 100% of her allocations submitted, but James is only 40% of the way there. So an approver may not want to approve individual reviews. They may want to approve a batch of reviews per allocator, and this system gives you the ability to do that. If we click in and perform the task, the view is nearly identical to the allocator. So again, this will show you each allocator and kind of how they're doing on their conformance. If they're 100% of the way there and they want to approve them all at the same time, they can simply click this thumbs up, and all allocations from this allocator will be approved. If they wanted to click in and kind of see where James stood individually, then they can open up the worksheet and they see those things, that they see the exact same worksheet that James was working from. Okay. So calibration, and this is something that Barbara addressed a little bit earlier, was that the calibrator is really going to kind of want to see the big picture. You know, how, are we within our budget that we set? Are we over budget? And per component. Now the thing I want to make clear here is that this calibration view will be per template. If we wanted to get kind of if you had several templates for different job roles or different groups of employees, to kind of see all templates pulled together, that would make use of our dashboards, which I will show you here after we view this task.
So why would you have a different template?
A different template would be used for those employees that would have a different salary structure, as you were talking about earlier, or maybe those that don't need to go through a full the same workflow.
Okay.
For example, if we were doing a compensation review for some of the higher level leaders, they may not need the same levels of approval as others. Okay, so you can see here the calibrator has a worksheet view, but the nice thing about this worksheet is that we can filter. So we can kind of slice and dice and get to the bottom of anything that may look a little bit unusual or of a concern. So if we wanted to focus in on the Atlanta org unit, we could, and we could see all of those reviews within there. The nice thing here is to have a filter around conformance. So if there were, you know, hundreds or possibly even thousands of reviews out there and we're not interested in looking at every little one, we just want to focus on those that are over budget, we can certainly do that. So let me hop to the dashboards and then we can talk a little bit about how we would see the organization as a whole. So when we get into the review budget summary, you can see that we have 3 total dashboards for compensation.
One thing I'll add too, as you can imagine, this is where it really can get strategic, and in terms of data and being able to provide this type of reporting to executives, especially CFOs and controllers, you know, love to have this visibility. So this is really a feature that speaks well to how you can kind of link this compensation salary administration to bigger financial and kind of budget initiatives.
All right. So within the budget summary dashboard, we have 4 graphs, the budget versus actual, budget conformance, and a specific over budget versus under budget. So you can tell within this organization, everybody is staying very well behaved. They're all staying under budget. But depending on your organization and your salary structure and the research, you know, under budget could also be a concern as well as over budget. So that's why we break it out and show you both. To kind of get to that view that I was talking about with focusing on more than one template, you would come to the configure area of the dashboard. And this is where we can say we want to look across all org units and we want to select more than one template. In our demo site, we only have one active template currently, but you could select any number of templates to combine and get a full picture view. We could also focus on just a component. So we may not be so concerned about the bonus, but we're concerned about the merit increase and making sure that we have enough dollars in the bank to support these salary increases moving forward. So you can see there's a lot of different options here. As a calibrator or a compensation administrator, to really put in the salary structure and analyze the data. So I'm going to pause here. We've come to kind of the close of our presentation, but I wanted to leave about 15 minutes for questions. So if anybody has a question, feel free to submit it into the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, we have a few questions. The first one I think is for Barbara, and it says, my company doesn't currently have a pay-for-performance structure set up, and I believe this is something that we really need. Could you please help me, by outlining the benefits so that I can share them with upper management?
Sure. Yeah, pay for performance structure, or incorporating pay for performance. Really, it comes down to a motivation. So we see that in base pay as well as in variable pay. Benefits of using variable pay, so using bonuses or incentives to compensate for individuals that have certain level of performance expectations or meet certain goals, is something that many times the financial leadership will like, because it controls for fixed costs, salary, but it does allow for individuals to monetarily be recognized when they go above and beyond a certain level of performance, which, as you can imagine, for top performers can be very motivating. It can be very demotivating to feel like the compensation is not, there isn't a pay for performance philosophy, and compensation is not taken into consideration for performance. The alternative to that, or another way to differentiate pay for performance, is by merit, and that's kind of an example we've shown where you take that 3% and based on your performance and your position in the range, but specifically really your performance, you're going to give more to your top performers than you are to those that are underperforming. And think about talent management and think about what we want to invest in. It really is just sending that message of not only we recognize, but we're going to invest in the talent that is giving us the most value. So it's a very great way to reward. It's a great message to send employees. How you actually deploy that, be it through base salary differentiation, or if you use put more weight towards variable pay, both can be really good approaches to incorporating pay for performance or implementing pay for performance.
Thank you. So we have another question. I think this is for Laura. Laura, can the system support salary letters, or how do you recommend we communicate to the employees these increases?
Yes, great question. So we did, in the template, we did talk about that salary letter, but something you may want to say is, well, what does it look like when it's final? So I'm going to come here to manage compensation reviews, and I'm going to look for a particular individual. We can pull up Rollo's salary letter. And so again, this is something that would be configured within the template, and we can set up permissions around when this letter would become available. So we could say that this letter is not made available. Nobody can see it until the full compensation review has been completed. This is something that could be emailed directly to the individual. And so again, it's just a really nice way to streamline the whole process. So instead of having to wait for all reviews for the organization to be finished. We can do this as compensation reviews are completed. This would be emailed out to the individual directly, so that they know what their increases will be.
Okay, we have one last question. And it is, I have salary and hourly employees in my organization. Could I use, this system to support the different configuration for each group?
Yes, absolutely. So the nice thing about our system, as many of our current clients would agree, is that we have the ability to include templates. So for each template is where we would configure a different workflow, a different salary structure, or if you said, hey, I don't have a salary structure, but I still want to do a merit increase. We come down here to our budget settings and we'll say, well, let's just use a range. So we know our target budget is 4%, plus or minus 1%. So you may say the individual review guidelines could be 6%, plus or minus 2%. So yeah, that's a great thing about kind of the combined templates and user groups of our system.
Well, thank you so much. It seems those are the questions. If something comes up later, feel free to email us at support@talentquest.com, and we'll make sure that we, answer any questions that you might have. And again, as I mentioned before, this webinar will be sent over to everybody. I apologize, for those of you that had trouble at the beginning, but again, we'll email it to you so you can, listen to it again, and especially, focus on the beginning that you might have missed. So our apologies, but we hope that you enjoyed this presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you.